Hey, good morning, everybody. I don't know how it is in Omaha today, but in Ames, it's very icy outside. So I hope you all are staying safe as you navigate around the town today. Today, I'd like to talk about one of the ancestors in my lineage, and this is part 3 of a talk that I started about a month ago. And I would highly encourage you, if you weren't present for the previous talks that I gave on Zen Lineage, that you watch those 2 previous talks, because they lay the foundation and the context for what I'm going to offer today. And I think, but also, even if you haven't heard the previous 2 talks on lineage, that you can still get something from this as well. So this talk is about one of my Zen ancestors, one of our Zen ancestors. His name is Daishun Shimbi Daiosho, and he is my great-grandfather teacher. So my teacher's teacher's teacher. And my teacher, Dayan Roshi, or Neosho, as she preferred to be called, shared stories about him to me. So what I'm about to share are my memories of those stories, some of those stories, and I will take full responsibility for any mistakes that I may have made here. So hold what you hear lightly, but I think the general sense of it hopefully comes forward. So I'd like to start out with a case, like in the Denko Oroku, the transmission of light. These stories of the ancestors often start out with a case, like what was like an interaction between teacher and student. And here's a case. So imagine yourself back maybe 1980-ish, early 1980s, in Japan. And you're peering in at a temple, and you see three Zen priests congregating around a tub of water that is on wheels. And they're the 3 priests. One is a little bit older, and the other 2 are somewhat younger. The older priest is Daishun Shimbi, and the younger 2 is Daito Roshi, Noda Daito Roshi, my grandfather teacher, and Dayan Roshi, my teacher. And they're congregating around this tub of water, and Daishun Shimbi asks Daito Roshi, "What's the best way to get that water in the tub to come to you?" And Daito Roshi is kind of perplexed maybe a little bit by the question, but he dips his hands in the water and splashes, kind of splashes the water a little bit on himself. So Daishun Shimbi, he takes the whole tub and he pushes it away. He pushes it away from him, and the tub ricochets back off of the wall, and the whole container of water splashes on Daito Roshi. That's the story. So what can we glean from that? Well, let me give you a little background on Daishun Shimbi Daiosho that I know. First, I want to introduce you, and he's actually a real person. I brought my, I have I don't know, this is a photo of him that was given to my teacher, maybe 20 years ago at least. It was after he had, I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was after he passed away. But he was born, I don't know all of the circumstances around his birth, but he was orphaned. He was an orphan. So he was taken in by a Zen priest, a Zen temple, probably brought up by the wife of Daishun Shimbi Daiosho and the priest himself. He was taken into their temple as an orphan. Again, I don't know the circumstances of how he came to be orphaned, but in that being orphaned, he connects immediately, in my mind, to Dogen Zenji, who lost his mother and father at a very early age. And he also connects with the Buddha himself, who lost his mother after just being a week old. So there's something there, I think, in the fact that he was brought into the world without parents and was raised by somebody other than his parents. You can maybe imagine that sense of loss that happened even before conscious awareness took place. And part of Japanese society and Asian culture is this idea of filial piety. Daishun Shimbi wasn't the only Zen priest to be brought up by a Zen priest. This is not an uncommon thing to take place. A temple will sometimes, if they have the means to do it, will take in an orphan. And there's an expectation in Japanese culture that you take care of the people who have taken care of you. The word for this is filial piety, where there's an understanding that your parents took care of you and you're indebted to them, not in a negative way. I mean, it could be taken that way if your experience with your family was negative. But there's a sense of, ideally, in an ideal situation, there's a sense of desire to repay or pay back the blessings that you have received. And in this case, from your parents. In Daishun Shimbi's case, from the parents that took him in. And this idea of filial piety rests on another important concept in Asian society and Confucian culture, and that is Ren, or benevolence, or humaneness. The Chinese character for humaneness, the first part is a person, right? It's just two strokes, one person. And the second part is the Chinese character for the number 2. And it's saying basically that in order to have benevolence or humaneness, it takes 2 people. You can't have benevolence outside of a relationship. And so the relationship of the family rests on a sense of benevolence. And you can think about how the father needs to put themselves in the shoes of the son, or the mother in the shoes of the son or daughter. And it's because of that sense of reciprocity that you can see the sense of seeing how the child sees the adult, the vulnerability, that sense of total dependence, right? And so you come to them as an adult, as a parent, out of a love. And if that benevolence there, that Ren is there in the relationship, you have harmony in the family. If it's not there, you're not. If the parents fail to see the child through the child's eyes, and they are dismissive of their needs, then there's not benevolence there, right? So benevolence is something that needs to be cultivated by the adults in the life of the child. And when that benevolence is there, you have the ability for a harmony and flourishing within the family. And that sets the groundwork for that flourishing in the society as well. And so out of a sense of filial piety, Daishun Shimbi became, my understanding is that he became a a Zen priest to repay the blessings of his father for taking him in as an orphan. He decided to become a Zen priest. That's my understanding. And so he has very humble origins. And, you may want to reflect even just for a second in your own life. How do you offer Ren to your own parents? Is that even a thought? This idea of benevolence. How do you repay the blessings that your own family, your own parents have given you? All right? Or if you have children, how do you repay how do you offer them benevolence in that relationship? Right? There's this important idea that exists in Asian society, but it's also in Western culture too, that the measure of a society is how well we take care of the orphans and how well we take care of the elderly. That, how well we do that offers a measure of how good or how benevolent the society is as a whole. And it shouldn't be something that's forced. If there's a lot of bad blood in the relationship and you feel forced to be kind, that's not the spirit behind this. There's a naturalness to it. It's kind of like one Confucian scholar, Mencius or Mengzi, he says, who wouldn't, if they saw a baby about to fall into a well, who wouldn't jump to help out and prevent that baby from falling? Right? It's just that innate sense. There's an innate goodness in us, and we respond out of that innate goodness. Who are your children? You might say, I don't have any children. But if you, I would suggest you not limit that to your blood. Our children are more than just our blood. And that's why I think if you haven't seen the previous 2 talks I gave on lineage, it would be helpful to do that. I'm not going to repeat that here, but just to say that our children are not simply our progeny that we had a, say in giving birth to. Our children can be much broader than that very narrow definition of children. And the same goes for our parents. Who are your parents? Right? We tend to think of just our blood family in that relationship, but it goes much deeper than that. Anybody that's nourished you in some way, whether it's physically or spiritually, those can also be considered our parents. Maybe it's too strong of a word to use, but we want to honor those people too. And I think of my own Zen teachers and my own spiritual teachers as well, outside of the world of Zen. I can think of a few people there. So, Daishun Shimbi, to return a little bit to him, Daishun Shimbi, he became a Zen priest, and then he moved up in the Soto Zen hierarchy in Japan, in Soto Shu, and had a high standing within the Soto Zen administration. So when my teacher, Dayan Roshi, when she asked her teacher, Daito Roshi, to ordain her, he said, I'll do it, but actually I think my teacher, Daishun Shimbi, should be the ordination teacher because I'm a fairly new teacher. I was just recently transmitted, and if Daishun Shimbi does the ordination, there'll be no question that it'll be legitimate, because he's got that place up in Soto Shu headquarters that everybody will recognize. Whatever he does, everybody will recognize. So he was a big wig, in a sense, in the Soto Zen world in Japan in his day. But here's the thing. Before my teacher met him, he was coming to Kappa Dojo with a group of other Zen priests to do work. Noda Daito Roshi was he was in the process of creating a new temple. And so his teacher, Daishun Shimbi, was coming to help out over, I'm not sure if it was a week or a weekend or a day, whatever. And he came with several other Zen priests to do that. And so my teacher at that point, it was before her ordination, and she was eager to meet the person who would do the ceremony. When she saw the group of monks there, she couldn't tell who was Daishun Shimbi, because all of the monks, they dressed the same, they all had shaved heads, none of them stood out. And that's a lesson for us right here, in that in Zen, even if you have a higher rank in the Soto Zen world, you don't show it. You don't make a show of that rank. You don't put it out there that you're above everybody else, because you're not. You're not. I mean, maybe in a certain sense, you have certain responsibilities that might be more than somebody else, but you don't show that in some special way. You don't try to stand out above others, and this is the important point. And in Soto Zen, we try not to stand out at all. We try not to make ourselves look more than somebody else, or especially if if you've had some special experience, that doesn't mean you're better than anybody else. So that's one of his attributes, is that he didn't try to, even though he had a high position, he didn't try to make a big deal out of it. He was a very humble human being. There's so with regards to, if we go back to this story about the water and him pushing the water and it ricocheting off the wall, coming back, and the whole bucket emptying out onto Daito Roshi. If we go back to that story, there's a Zen saying that my teacher was fond of sharing. If you want a stick, I'll take it away. If you don't want a stick, I'll give one to you. What's that stick? What's the stick that you have or don't or want? What's the stick that you're holding on to? Right? What does that stick symbolize? If you want a stick, if you have a stick, I'll take it away. If you don't want a stick, I'll give one to you. Right? What does that stick symbolize for you? For me, this past week, the stick that I didn't want was a sick baby and lots of sleeplessness. That was the stick that I was given, I didn't want. All right, we have 3 teachers: old age, sickness, and death. Those are some major sticks that we don't want. But what are the sticks for you? What you push away, here's the thing, what we push away will come rushing back towards us. So we have to be very, very careful on this. Whatever it is that we don't want, if we push it away very strongly, watch out. It'll find another way to tidal wave back in on us. So we have to be very, very careful. I know I have to be careful about that too. Be careful, we say in the West, we say, be careful what you ask for, you might get it. Another story about Daishun Shimbi is that my teacher, Diane Roshi, she had been in training with her teacher for several months at this point now. She had already ordained, and her teacher was really hard on her, very relentless with regards to what he demanded of her in terms of her practice. And she was really starting to fade and thinking, I don't know if I can continue. And she said that Daishun Shimbi saved her practice. Daishun Shimbi saved her practice. Daito Roshi was was always giving her sticks she didn't want and taking away the sticks she did want. And so she went, he told her, you know what, you gotta, Daito Roshi told my teacher, you gotta get out of here. Go see Daishun Shimbi for a weekend. I can't be with you anymore right now. So go be with him. So she did that, and she ended up, in one of the stories when she went to go see him, I don't know if this happened at the same time, but she took the bullet train to get to his temple. It was in a different location, a different place, maybe a couple hours away on the train. And she fell asleep. She was so exhausted that she fell asleep on the train and missed the exit to get off on for his temple. And when she awoke, she found her way back, but it was much, much later. And the common courtesy in the Zen world is that you don't enter a temple after 5 p.m. If you do it later than 5 p.m., people are really disgruntled, or you might not even get in at that time. So she was very, very concerned. She had been sleeping well. She had really rough practice with her teacher. And here she was, now she's late. She was getting in like 11 p.m. to Daishun Shimbi's temple. And she was so anxious as to, how is he going to greet me? And when she got there at the temple, he greeted her as if it was broad daylight. He was so happy to see her. It was as if there was no problem at all coming late. So it demonstrated his own compassion, his care for her. And so that immediately let down her guard. And then later that day, they had breakfast. And you can imagine Zen practice in Japan in the early 80s, late 70s, that the diet was fairly meager. Brown rice, miso soup, vegetables, maybe couple of pieces of tofu. And certainly no bread or toast, nothing from a Western diet. What did Daishun Shimbi do? He offered her toast in the morning. My teacher was so moved by that gesture. She actually, if I remember the story correctly, she was moved to tears to be eating toast. Because you have to remember, she was in Japan. She had been living there 12, 13 years at that point, away from her own culture. And Daishun Shimbi had the idea to offer her something from her own culture that would help to make her feel at home. So that's the kind of person that he was. And he exuded that kind of benevolence, the benevolence that I assume that he felt he had received from his own teacher. That benevolence, to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to look through the eyes of the other person and see, what does this person need right now? That is our Zen practice. It's not how long you can sit. It's not how many hours you can sit. It's not how still you can be. It's not how you can get rid of racing thoughts. That's not it. The practice is, how do we see things through other people's eyes and help them out? How do we offer them benevolence? How do we offer kindness and compassion to other people? I don't care if they're Buddhist or not Buddhist, doesn't matter. Right? That's the heart of Zen practice. And that's not saying we shouldn't sit Zazen. Hopefully Zazen, if you have a really deep experience in Zazen, you can start to see yourself as not separate from other people. And so it can aid in that cultivation of benevolence. Zazen can aid in that. So we should absolutely keep sitting and sit for as long as you're able. But keep in mind, it's not about, we don't do Zazen to solidify a separate self. We do Zazen in order to break down the walls between self and others. That's the point. So we need to go into Zazen with that sense. It's not about, the byproduct might be that you feel calmer, right? Or you feel a sense of peace. And that's important in any relationship. But keep in mind that bigger picture of seeing things through the other person's eyes. One other story I'd like to share and close with is that my teacher, after she had completed her training in Japan, 12 years of monastic training, she came back to the United States, to Pennsylvania, where I met her, and she wasn't seeing her teachers, and certainly not Daishun Shimbi, maybe for months or years. And Daishun Shimbi, by this point, I believe he had suffered from a series of strokes, and he was bedridden for, I'm not sure, the last 5 or maybe 10 years of his life. Maybe not that long. I'm not sure how long he was bedridden for, but he was bedridden for a good long time. And presumably his wife took care of him. And so before my own priest ordination, Dayan Roshi went to Japan on a visit. I'm not exactly sure the reasons for her visit. Maybe she had to give a talk, was invited to give a talk, and then she went to visit her teachers. And she made a stop at Daishun Shimbi Daiosho's temple to see how he was doing. And he was in bed. His wife allowed her into his room to see him. And when she knelt down by the bedside and presented herself to him, she said to me that he smiled, and he said, in a very, as best as he could, given that his stroke affected his speech, his ability to talk, he said in Japanese, ureshi. Ureshi. In other words, I am happy. Right? I mean, imagine that. Here he is, having had being bedridden, ill, on his deathbed, and he's able to say, I am happy. He was happy to see her. It gave him joy, right? And we can only wish or hope that when we are sick, when we're on our deathbed, that we could have a similar kind of countenance towards the world. It may not be easy, but we can start today. We can practice today, And I'm just thinking back to earlier this week, holding a sick baby. She's doing much better now. It was ear infections, and we weren't able to lay her down without her being in a lot of pain. So for a couple of nights, I held her sitting upright in a chair, not totally upright, but sitting upright, and I didn't get very much sleep. But I can say, and I just bring this up because I'm trying to reflect on my own practice. Was I happy doing that? I will say that it was comforting to me to hold her in that way. And I think that's our practice. I think our practice is to do our very best, starting with our own immediate family, to hold our family members in love, in caring, in kindness, as best we can, finding that joy in them if we can. But don't limit yourself to your family, your blood family. It can go much bigger than that. And find the joy, whether it's sickness, old age, or even death. That's our practice. And even Thich Nhat Hanh, he said to my teacher, you can enjoy your breathing, you can enjoy your sitting, you can enjoy your practice, anywhere we go. So keep that in mind. Let's keep cultivating that. I want to close with this poem. I have many sticks. I give them all to the Buddha. Thank you.